We've got all these apps, we've got the likes and the dings and the pings and all the different systems and tens of thousands of engineers whose full-time job, which I learned in Stolen Focus, their full-time job to try to take my attention away from you, right? And the modern knowledge worker is in a constant battle. So, what I like to paint the picture for listeners is if you pick your favorite athlete as an example, it might be Serena Williams or um, I don't know, Tom Brady or Michael Jordan, right? And if you pictured them at the height of the game, pull out their phone and check their Instagram, it's like, well, that would never happen, right? They're in the moment, they're in a zone. Comedians are in a moment and in the zone, even if they have a heckler, right?
Welcome to the New World Podcast, where we delve into the ever changing and accelerating pace of global change and its impact on our lives. I'm your host, John Paul Flores, broadcasting live from the New World Studio. Today, we're diving into the world of AI and automation. As an enthusiast and expert in lead generation, I will guide you through understanding and leveraging these technologies for your business and for your personal use. And don't forget, AI and automation might be unstoppable forces, but that doesn't mean you are powerless. Tune in to learn how to make them work for you and not the other way around. But first, let's meet our guest. One. Welcome to the New World Podcast, where we navigate the changing world around us. I'm your host, John Paul Flores, specializing in lead generation and AI automation, here to help you understand how our world is changing and what it means for you. In this episode, we'll explore Kate's journey from educator to entrepreneur, uncovering the pivotal moments and challenges that led her to establish Five to Flow. And by the way, Five to Flow does mean something because it is part of their methodologies. We'll delve into the unique services offered by her consultancy, including innovative programs like Wellness Wave and 360 Achieve Flow, and discuss their profound impact on organizational cultures. Kate will also share her insights on the financial implications of employee disengagement and the power of prioritizing the employee experience in driving profitability. And by the way, just a fun fact, Kate has posted something that says on last 2022, $8.8 trillion were lost just because employees were disengaged. So we better watch this. Sit back, relax, and join us as we navigate the future of work with the brilliant Kate Visconti. Kate, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
John, thank you for that amazing intro. How did you get to know me so well so fast?
I mean, most of the things you need to know about someone is
Uh,
on LinkedIn now, and yeah, it's amazing.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and interest. We're grateful to be here with you today and look forward to the conversation.
That's amazing. And before we dive into the more in-depth questions, because I do have some, would you mind letting us know who Kate Visconti is, what your expertise, your experience, and what keeps you busy these days?
Oh, wow. Those are great questions. Who am I? Well, I am an adventurer at heart, as well as an educator or teacher. I mean, just since my youngest days, remember loving being involved in helping others realize their fullest potential from an empathetic place. So, you mentioned I started my career as an educator. That was high school English. What I learned in that time is really to understand and embrace individual experiences and get to really know the heart of the human spirit, and that we all um, interpret and experience this world in very different ways. So there's no one size fits all. So, at my core, here's some fun facts. I am a 7 on the Enneagram, which is visionary, eternal enthusiast. So, I love adventure. Where you're reaching me right now is in the middle of one of my biggest life adventures, which is being a digital nomad full time. So, I don't live anywhere. So, you might have seen that post on LinkedIn that it's been a little almost 2 years that I've been traveling exclusively and honing that perspective I just shared, that everybody experiences life very differently, from how they load and unload the dishwasher to how they take care of their pets to how they share their political or religious views in a household among family and friends. Um, what keeps me busy right now is Five to Flow as an organization is on the cusp. We're this close to launching some new products. So, this podcast will be a very big catalyst as we share it and help you grow your business as well, John. Is our diagnostic tool that you referenced in the intro, the Wellness Wave, has undergone a major facelift. We are adding a lot of content and value to individual respondents. So we feel that will help organizations and individuals make change within themselves to create a better environment for customers. So I can't remember everything you asked there, but who at the core, I'm a fun loving person. In my spare time, I did some stand up for a little while. I got into powerlifting. I'm super into health and fitness and wellness. And that's shown also in how we run Five to Flow with our co founder being a health and fitness consultant. So there you have it. That's me.
If I'm not mistaken, I saw that 3 years ago you had a YouTube channel focused on workouts.
Oh my goodness, John, you stumbled upon my YouTube page. So, in the height of COVID, I was training for a powerlifting competition. And when all the gyms closed, I was looking for in home workouts and trying to also entertain my friends and family. At the time, I was living in New Zealand. I had moved there just 6 months before lockdown, and I didn't know anyone for more than a couple months. I was alone, and my approach to combating anxiety and depression and all the things people experienced during COVID was through humor. So I created very silly, now everybody's going to go look for them, themed workouts, in home workouts. Where I would get into costume, do impersonations. So I was combining my stand up history and love for fun and singing and dancing as our own therapy. And I will share that at the end, I closed the loop on the reason for it. And it was to understand that we don't have to leave the house to find our happiness. It's a choice from within. So that was the reason for those in home workouts.
And by the way, I did see the Saint Stainfield one, the one with the mustache. I saw that.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Well, everybody's favorite was when I did MC Hammer, and they were curious how I had MC Hammer pants in a costume closet, and I literally used my own creative resources and innovative spirit to create costumes. So that cracks me up that you found those videos. Thank you for being a true fan. That's amazing. And I look forward to seeing my views boost after that. So thank you.
That's fantastic. And just on the digital nomad side, are you by the way going from different countries to different countries, or are you mostly in the US just traveling different states?
It is both. So I am currently at 47 US states. I'll hit my 48th in July, which will be Vermont. And then I'll only be missing Alaska and North Dakota. Most recently, I just returned from London, and prior to that, I went to Belize with some great friends of mine, and that was an amazing experience. So, since I've been digital nomading, I've also been to Croatia, Cape Town, South Africa, and where else have I gone? France, Mexico. So, yeah, it's both.
That's amazing. And let's move to the questions about what you do specifically. The concept of organizational wellness and employee engagement is not that common or understood really. I mean, there's people who teaches how to motivate your employees, but not more on the employee engagement and wellness side.
Yep.
Can you let us know what that is specifically?
Yeah, so our perception of employee engagement is quite a unique one. We want to dispel the myth that it's a fluffy kind of concept, and that employees can choose to be engaged or disengaged. There is a lot of growth mindset that we teach about, but what we have found in prior to even founding Five to Flow, but as a group over the last couple of years, is poor business processes, insufficient technology enablement, or too much technology, too many barriers in the employee's way. Anything that impedes them from being successful within an organization, that could be poor leadership, low vision. So, in those things I'm saying, you have to consider the people, the culture, the processes, the technologies, and the analytics and metrics that you use. And what we say is it takes all five to flow. And in order for an individual to be able to get into flow, they need to be able to stay focused. So you mentioned you saw our focus video today. The modern work paradigm and a lot of the world is constructed around how can I interrupt John right now? And even though I don't like to have it within reach, but I'm timing myself, this is the thing that's distracting us the most. And it's not necessarily always the blame of the employer. So we want to equip employees with empowerment to be more engaged while we work with the companies to remove the barriers and the distractions that are moving toward disengagement and ultimately burnout. So I recently wrote a blog about this because employee disengagement is on the rise, or employee engagement is on the decline, along with resilience. And you referenced the $8.8 trillion problem and what that is. So, in an organization that may be performing just fine, they could be great. Organizations that are failing often see the costs of employee absenteeism. The number one cause for disability leave right now is depression and anxiety, and that is oftentimes being caused by overwhelm at work, um, breakdown of community, things like that. So, what we're trying to accomplish here is looking at the five core elements, really understanding what is happening within an organization that's causing that disengagement, and help employers remove those barriers so engagement can go up, productivity can go up, and we have happier employees and happy customers, right?
That's fantastic. And on the side of distraction, one of the best ways that I found that I can become more productive is just having a to-do list. I like sharing this to everyone. So I just wanted
That's
to share
awesome.
that.
Well, let me
Uh,
tell you why having the to-do list is so important. Is your to-do list prioritized by critical things you want to accomplish this week?
um, Most of it just being what I need to do. Plus, if I have more time, I just write the things that I could do.
Yep.
And the fact that I wrote it down and makes me just feel like a fool if I don't finish it.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, you're very intrinsically motivated, right? That you feel, and extrinsically. So it's good to have both, where that sense of accomplishment might be one of your extrinsic or intrinsic motivators, and an extrinsic is like crossing that off and feeling like you got something done. What we want to promote too, for you to be more engaged in the workplace, would be that checklist or that to-do list is helping you continuously achieve micro and macro goals, right? So if your to-do list, maybe you worked on it with um, your leadership team at an organization. If it's a different individual, I think you probably run your own company. So if you know what goal you want to achieve as an individual for your team and for the company, then those goals can cascade down to you, to that to do list. And when employees know that every single action I make today is furthering me toward the goal, versus companies that are constantly getting pings on Slack, emails, things that are very administrative. They don't feel like deep work. We know that you're always going to have those administrative tasks, but we want to move employees more toward being able to not like nobody went to get a degree to check emails, right? Their degree is in engineering, or it's in being a medical doctor, or it's in being a programmer. And if you're constantly just reacting, you're losing that focus, and the likelihood of you finishing that to do list goes down significantly.
That's fantastic. And when COVID started, did you see that more people, more employees are more engaged when they work from home or from an office?
So the statistics are showing that there was a massive decline immediately at COVID, just people feeling detached and disconnected from people. And then it started to come on the rise for just a moment while we were understanding how to better engage employees from a remote environment. And then it went back down. So I can find some statistics for you, at least for the US, but globally engagement has steadily been on the decline and has not gotten better in 20 years. The other thing that's incredibly important to think about that is propensity to leave when you're disengaged or propensity to go on medical leave. And so, with the remote environment, there are specific interventions I think we could put into place that would make it a little bit better. But I don't want to say that an intervention specifically for a remote versus on-site worker could be magically solved with just that variable. We have to think about like if the business process is terrible or the distractions are super high or the technologies aren't enabling you or your company doesn't really have a meaningful purpose to you, whether you're in the office or remote, those types of things will carry over. So if you can think about yourself, if you're working remote and every single time you try to process a claim or close a case, it doesn't work, is that any better or worse if you're on site? So, we really want to think about what the actual root cause of the disengagement is. I would say that remote work has removed people a little bit more from a cultural kind of teamwork feel, and that being on Zoom is far less personal. Had I been sitting in the office with you, we'd be picking up on each other's energy. We could probably get into more group flow, but I wouldn't say that remote work and COVID or on site has the number one implication of disengagement. I think there's those five core elements I mentioned that you have to think about.
That's fantastic. And also, I noticed in your website that you assess the performance across five core elements of flow. Can you tell us more what those are and what their purpose is in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 5 at the highest level are people, culture, process, technology, and analytics. Um, and that's what I said, it takes all 5 to flow. Within the people category, we consider things like your recruiting and onboarding processes, the health and wellness of your employees, the change management capabilities you have, um, how you consider your customers, etc. In the culture category, we're really thinking about your organization's mission, vision, and purpose. If what you're doing from a core value perspective resonates with your employees, we look at leadership, grit, all of those things. Within process, we look across all of your key business processes and understand if they're outdated, if they're very bureaucratic or constricting, or if they're streamlined and automated. From a technology perspective, we look everything from your automations, your enablers to execute on a job versus what's distracting or what's confusing. So if I have to go to Teams and Slack and email and a WhatsApp to figure out where to find materials, and then the last one, which is really important, is your data and analytics, and not just from what you have to take action with, but like how are you measuring your employees? How are you defining success? So if I were to ask you, how do you know you're successful, John? And you told me, well, I don't know, my boss is still paying me, but I've just got this giant to-do list that kind of doesn't amount to much. So I don't really know versus, oh, well, if I close this many cases, if I get this many customer satisfaction reviews, if I create an architectural design by the end of the week, whatever, how you quantify outputs would be those analytics.
That's fantastic. And last 2022, as you have posted in your LinkedIn and in your website, the cost of disengagement of employees is at an all-time high of $8.8 trillion. That's
Yep.
a lot. Do you mind letting us know what's the main cause of it? I mean, if we go on more detailed explanation of why
Yeah.
people are more disengaged.
Yeah, so then I would say the top costs or implications of that cost is out of office time, extra recruiting costs for attrition. Um, we also see low productivity. And so, as distractions are at an all time high, let's say every single time you start to get some work done, you get distracted, and it takes a very specific amount of time to get focused at the level to not make mistakes, not to do rework. There's a point of diminishing returns in the work week where, after so many hours a week, which is around 32 hours a week, that you're doing rework, making mistakes, duplicating efforts with colleagues. And so when you think about low productivity, low value, low creativity then ensues. And so you are less competitive with your product innovation. So these costs are basically when you think about salary paid. Let's say I'm paying you to work 8 hours a day, but really you're getting about 2 and 3/4 of work done a day, of hours of work done. And how do we pivot that mindset of what value could I actually create in those 3 hours a day if I was fully focused, or in 8 hours a day if I could really get my job done? So there's lots of variables in those costs. If you can think about organizations where how much it costs to recruit, onboard, and get a new employee up to full productivity, and then if around 60% of your workforce is disengaged, what that looks like from a financials for your company, how many customer mistakes you make, so returns or refunds you have to give. All of those financial calculations add up, and it is a massive problem that I feel like people are addressing in the wrong ways.
I think if companies are able to choose, let's say they want to have more work done, and they have two choices: either to hire somebody or to make their management better. Personally, I think having your management be better is sometimes 10 times better than just getting somebody else to work for you. I mean, especially if you try and hire somebody and they go to your office and most of their colleagues are disengaged, then they're
Yep.
just gonna be another one.
Yep. Yeah, one of the other things I didn't mention too is stress levels at work. So think about the always on model that you saw in the video, that I'd love all your listeners to watch. If you think about that stress level, then um, causing anxiety, and how well do you work when you're in an anxious state? So if you're constantly jumpy or constantly interrupted, and then therefore are doubling your error rate, or um, saying the wrong things to customers, and then, well, nobody told me that, so now I want a refund. I mean, it just starts kind of creating this ripple effect, versus what if we stopped pushing and pushing and pushing from this side of the equation of growth, and we started over here with engaged employees are what make happy customers, and happy customers buy more from us. And it also costs far less to keep and sell more to an existing customer than it does to find new ones, right? Which, you know, this with running a podcast, it's probably way easier to get a guest to be on a second time, or a listener to listen to more, than it is to get new guests and get new listeners, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in lead generation, it's hard to get people attention. And once you get their attention, once they say yes to whatever you're offering or whatever you want to talk about, most of them will not reply again for the next 30 days. And it's
Yeah.
very common nowadays.
So, what is the new statistic? When I was teaching sales best practices, they said on average you have to contact a lead 8 times before you get attention in a meeting. What is the new statistic? It's got to be even worse now.
I don't have the statistics on me because
Yeah.
I'm not a statistics guy. I'm more
Yeah.
of
Okay.
a I just want to
That's
do
fair
this
enough.
and let's see the results. But yeah, most of the time, especially let's talk on the podcast, getting guests. Once I contact them, most of the time I need to contact them at least 3 times to
Yeah.
actually, make them answer. And I don't contact them on the fourth time just because I see that the results just go so low that it's not even worth it. I mean,
Yeah.
for the first email, there's around 20% chance that they might reply depending on how good you are. On the second one, it's 10%. On the third one, depending on your timing, could be either 3 to 5%.
Yep.
And after that, it's basically less than 1%. So what's the point? I mean, just contact new people if that's the case.
Yeah, so you've got some great analytics. So that's a great example for the five to flow piece is if you had a manager who's like contact them a fifth and sixth and seventh time because and and you have autonomy in your role. Autonomy is a huge flow trigger, as is mastery, and you've mastered this process for yourself, right? So you're able to get into flow doing that outreach. The other thing I'd want to mention on that topic too is when you think about how many companies or people or engineers are trying to get my attention. We've got all these apps, we've got the likes and the dings and the pings and all the different systems and tens of thousands of engineers whose full-time job, which I learned in Stolen Focus, it's their full-time job to try to take my attention away from you, right? And the modern knowledge worker is in a constant battle. So what I like to paint the picture for listeners is if you pick your favorite athlete as an example, it might be Serena Williams or um, I don't know, Tom Brady or Michael Jordan, right? And if you pictured them at the height of the game, pull out their phone and check their Instagram, it's like, well, that would never happen, right? They're in the moment, they're in a zone. Comedians are in a moment and in the zone, even if they have a heckler, right? They've learned how to get into flow with a heckler or musicians. You don't see your favorite band or singer up on stage suddenly checking a Slack message because there's some emergency in their role. So, how can we apply concepts of athletics or jobs where you wouldn't want your surgeon who's operating on your heart to take a moment to read the fire drill about some crazy medical administrative issue? So, those are the kinds of principles we're trying to instill through our collective.
That's fantastic. And on that regard, I have worked with this one company where they're basically as SEO agency, and one of the best things that I like about them is that they have this SEO guys, and you have a one admin that you talk to, and they never let you talk with their guys. They basically just, hey, talk to us. Let's handle it. If it's something fixable, let's fix it on your end, and if not, then we can bring in the team. We don't want to distract them, and I think that's one of the best key things a leader can do to make sure that their team is actually being able to work.
Yeah, I love that. I wonder too what we would call that is a flow block. So, if an organization is really into flow, you might have no meeting Mondays where you can spend Monday just really getting deep work done, or every day from 3 to 5. We know that John is in flow, prepping for his next podcast, reading all about five to flow, right? So, you clearly came into this call very prepared, but imagine a salesperson or a podcaster who is just constantly being pinged in all different directions and like, now I got to look at Five to Flow. Now I got to look at Canva. Now I got to look at Salesforce. And you can't ever really do that deep work to internalize what you learned about me, which is very impressive. So it sounds like, John, you've experienced flow. I'd be curious if you think you have.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time I don't, but if I'm inviting people on the podcast, it's my job to at least make sure that I learn something about you, because I'm taking your time. Let's be honest here. I'm taking your time, asking you to spend time with me, and I appreciate it. And that's why I make sure that I'm actually prepared. I'm not just going in here, doesn't know anything about you. And
Yep.
let's move on. Can you tell us more about the programs like Wellness Wave and 360 Achieve Flow?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Wellness Wave is a proprietary diagnostic that I've been working on. Some of our board members and I honed it, some of the content from over a decade ago. I have repurposed tons of this survey kind of content, and then in 2020 gathered probably about 20 people around the world to write very specific survey questions to their discipline. So I mentioned the five core elements, and then through each of the five, there are five subcategories. So, what the Wellness Wave does is helps us quantify the root cause of issues and gather the strengths of an organization based on their employees' opinion or sentiment. We distribute it to individuals, or if there's an organization we're working with, they can get a campaign so they can see their roll up scores as an organization. Beginning in just a couple weeks with this new product launch, we are going to have a very cool customized report for each respondent, and then we'll be leveraging content therein to future put into an app where you can continuously growing the data within your company and your individual survey. And that app will also house the next product that we have launched into beta, which is called Discover Flow. That is our leadership course that helps individual teammates on a team and the leaders within that team understand how to promote a flow environment where employees can become re-engaged, grow their productivity through these focused efforts, and learn those principles. And then what Achieve Flow is our service associated to those two products. So what we do is all of our products are interchangeable. They can cross sell and upsell into each other to create a relationship with our clients. We want to get to know them the way you've gotten to know us and really help them achieve the outcomes. We're a very purpose based company. So, the Achieve Flow, we have an intimate interviewing process with individuals. We will shadow meetings, we'll do external research and see how the world is responding to your organization and your brand. And then we present back to the leadership team our core findings, what we think the critical challenges are that are impeding them to reach the results they're trying to reach, or prepare for growth or transformation. And then we prioritize in that session which programs should or could be put into place for them to implement these interventions and see those valuable outcomes. So, for example, if your organization or any that you've interviewed, like this SEO company you mentioned, if we could uncover some of the critical barriers to the employee's success and help empower them to achieve more as individuals, then we would work with the leadership team to make changes at the macro level, like what processes should be rewritten, what technology should be removed, and which ones should be updated, all at the based on the strategy of the organization, what they want to achieve as a company. So those are our critical offerings. We also help companies implement the interventions, and we also have a really large partner network that we don't want to be all things to all people. We have some special skills, and outside of those special skills, we bring in organizations that can support us, like with different types of coaching or different types of technology enablement, etc. So hopefully that made sense.
That's fantastic. And one of the key takeaways that I got from what you said is that most of the time you actually try and understand the purpose of the change that they want to do, their why. And,
Yep.
most companies nowadays, even the managers, they see this tool. Let's say when ChatGPT was released, I bet a lot of those managers say, "Hey, hey John, use this tool, ChatGPT. Why? well, I saw our competitor using it and they're very successful. Just put it there. Maybe we can work it out. And they don't know why they're doing it. They just
Yep.
want to, yeah, let's copy this because I saw it working from somebody else. And I don't think that's going to be helpful in the long term.
Yeah, I love that you said that, and that's an interesting thing. Our why was we continued working with clients who didn't know their why. So for 12 years of my career, I worked for three different global strategic systems integrators for a large global CRM company. And we would go to implement this tool, and when one of the clients was the epitome, I said, why'd you guys buy this? What's our core goal and outcome so we can measure the return on investment?" And they said, our CEO saw the commercial during the Super Bowl and made us buy it. And so here we are. And I'm like, okay, let's see if we can turn this around and find some purpose and value to it and pivot that message. So also, just from the company's own branding perspective. So, let's say if they want to be the number one fill in the blank at whatever they do, I'm like, well, do you want to be the number one at that? Or do you want your clients to achieve X? Like, what's more important? Um, so, instead of us being like the number one wellness organization, I want to drive real value and purpose and engagement for the individual employees, the teams, and the company themselves, so you can start to feel like a real change. Like, I really want to change lives. Our whole team does.
That's fantastic. And yeah, the why is very important because it's not gonna work if you don't have the end in mind,
Yep.
especially for those tools where most of the time they're complicated to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
And in your about section in your five to flow in LinkedIn, it highlights that engaged employees are more healthier, more creative, productive, and collaborate more. Can you share your perspective on where this positive change typically begins? Does it begin from the employee or from their managers, their leaders?
Well, I am a firm believer that we choose a lot, right? And so if you're in a really, really bad situation, I feel like you either have to try to change, the situation or change your perception of it or leave the situation. So, in my mind, the concept that is written there in that about section is about being able to access flow. So if you're not super familiar with flow, it was coined by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi in the 1970s. And his postulation is if an employee is given a role or an individual, like the athletes we mentioned, or singers, or what have you, writers, anybody who can take a really concerted focus on something that they're passionate about, they are far more productive, they're far more fulfilled, they're therefore then more creative. And so organizations that promote flow, so I'm going to answer it in two ways here. The employee has a responsibility for their mindset, right? Growth mindset versus fixed mindset, to understand themselves enough to know what they're there for. Are they working from a core value? So, our Discover Flow program, for example, shares this. But then, what I used to always say before I understood all the concepts of flow is as a leader or the company, it's my job to give you the trampoline to jump on so you can spring forward. But if you don't jump on it, I'm not going to push you. So, in an organization, we want that trampoline to be set up. We want it to not be covered in snakes, right? So, in that model, or like, let's say, I love using the analogy of a 4x4 relay around a track. And if one of them is marketing, one is sales, one is operations, one is delivery or what have you, that every part of the track needs to be smooth. You need to block the wind for all four teammates equally. They all need the right equipment for their part of the relay. You can't just fix one part. Um, so, from a leadership perspective, we want to see barriers removed. We want to see a strong vision, mission, purpose, and an understanding of goals. We want to see distractions minimized. and really put more value in outcomes than inputs. So if I say, John, I need you to work 10 hours a day because we're just so busy, if you're doing non-productive work 8 of those 10 hours versus, "Hey, John, we want to see 2 podcasts a week that people wanna listen to," and that took you 4 hours a week, would you rather work 50 hours a week or 8 and get the same outcomes, right? So we wanna see the leadership teams really understand the value of a truly healthy, productive employee over clocking in and clocking out. Obviously, there are jobs that we have to clock in and clock out. Um, we apply this as much to the modern knowledge worker as possible. So, like, if you picture other industries where you do have to be on the phones for 8 hours or whatever to serve your clients, we just want to see that that infrastructure for every role promotes the ability to get into flow and reach those critical outcomes that you read about there.
That's fantastic. And I don't think many people actually know that flow is a skill that you can learn. I mean, and it is an amazing skill. I mean, if you have a 3 week long project that you need to complete and you forgot everything about it and you just have 2 hours to complete it, you become a sudden genius. So I guess it is worth it to learn
That's
for anyone.
amazing. Yeah. Yeah, we talk a lot about that in the Discover Flow course too. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback we've gotten is for employees who know how they feel when they're stressed and their cortisol's raised, their adrenaline's raised, they're like on hyper alert, the hormones are racing, and that's the struggle phase. And when you can recognize you're in struggle, how do you proactively go, oh, I'm in struggle. I need to step away, take 10 deep breaths in nature, play with the dog, do the release, right? So that's the second phase of the flow cycle. The third then is you come back and you look at the problem from a new way. You can get into flow, you turn off all your alerts, you tell your teammates, "Hey, I'm off of Slack or I'm on do not disturb because I'm motivated to get this written or this recorded," or I mean, like right now, if we're in the middle of the recording and somebody knocked on the door or the phone rang and knocked us out of our flow, we might have to like go edit it and it's going to add more time. So then the most important part is to recognize when you're at peak flow and you're like using all these amazing happy hormones and you're getting the feedback in the real moment, and you and I are having this great chat, or you're with a customer and it's a great interaction, or you're knocking out that presentation, that you recognize flow, and to avoid the flow hangover, you're like, okay, I'm going to stop now at my peak so I can go do a recovery and return to this really happy place much more easily than starting back over in struggle. So you can read a lot about the flow cycle. Jason Haller, our chief performance and product officer, writes a ton about it in that Discover Flow course. We teach all of these concepts.
And there is the rest and recovery factor, especially if you're going to in and out of flow. I used to work 7 days a week, and it's fun working a lot. But I did notice that once in a while, if I step away from the office, just makes me more productive.
Yeah. Well, and one thing too, which you did wisely, is you booked this for 45 minutes, and hopefully you don't have somebody in 1 minute that you have to talk to, because our brains also, right now, we just said a lot and we've got this big cognitive load, right? And we're in flow. So that recovery, if it's just 10 minutes between meetings to then do some stretching or take a quick walk in nature or something active that helps you release some of the hormones from flow, and then you can pivot to oxytocin and serotonin and really enjoy that happy feeling, get some rest and recovery in that way, and start the cycle again.
I did notice that. I don't. You're the first one to actually brought that up. When I finish recording a podcast, actually, it's hard for me to work. Do other tasks. Just, I mean, I'm asking questions. I'm reading of a question list. I try to adapt those questions to the ones that you answer, and yeah, it is somewhat tiresome. And yeah, the recovery phase is amazing. And
Yes.
can you share an example of a client or organization that you helped and the results that they got?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've worked with several different clients on the Discover Flow from the live perspective. We're about to release the modules of that. And so we've gotten some great feedback from one was a university client. They're actually published on our website. So all these testimonials are public. So I'll just share one example um, with this university. They put their whole student Res Life team through it, and they all really learned some concepts of how to use better language with each other when they needed to focus, how to kind of disable some of those alerts. And so the outcomes were higher productivity levels. Some of our other clients that have given great feedback and testimonials um, or just simply putting new parameters into place, like defaulting your meetings to be 20 and 50 minutes instead of 30 and 60. If you have multiple people late coming to a meeting, that you actually take the first 5 minutes for some kind of mental reset. So, from some of our other clients where we've done much larger innovations into interventions like process reengineering, we've definitely seen the sales processes and cycles shorten. We've seen higher win rates with how they are engaging with customers. And actually, just learning from what we recommend, how they can prioritize their critical programs and allow employees to work from that checklist. The most interesting one I would say is a client who's in professional services consulting and how they could apply themselves being the distraction, right? So if you're on a project doing a technology implementation and you're constantly pinging the developer, "Hey, where are you with that code?" It's like, "Well, I was 90% there and you just threw me out of my creative cycle." So they actually started implementing the do not disturb and were able to get better focus. I would say that I don't want to over promise on metrics, that they take time. You have to, like I said, put the trampoline there, but if they don't jump on it, so the change management piece of what we do is critical, and having the client have accountability at the individual team and company level that they have to put into place these changes, respect the individual boundaries that are put into place. So if you said to your boss, "Hey, I need to have no meeting Mondays now," it's much easier if the boss lets the whole team do that versus one person having to stand out as the no meeting Monday guy. So, it's a great question. The metrics are long time coming, but we are really excited that with more of the analytics we're launching in our next product release, that we'll be able to have a more firm, measurable answer for you on that next time.
And it's very understandable that the analytics takes time, especially because you're not changing just one process, you're changing the way they work. So I guess it
Yep.
does take time.
Yep.
And in your view, what are the most common misconceptions or myth about organizational wellness? And do some organizations think it's just an additional work for the
Mhm.
managers to try to implement this thing? Why should we bother? What are those common misconceptions?
Yeah, I would say the biggest myth, and you've probably heard this from millions of people around the world. We call these soft skills, like some of these things, or like companies who say, "Hey, let's hire," or they don't meet all the required skills. Well, it's like, but if their attitudes, right? So I think some of the biggest myths is that engagement is a fluffy thing. That's what I referenced earlier, that if I put, a ping pong table in the break room or let people work from home a little more often or just make some minor tweaks to our conversations or offer perks. Okay, so I think perks, like it's great that you're giving me a car allowance or a pass to the gym, but like if I don't give you the time to go to the gym, how how is that pass helping me, right? Or if I make you feel guilty for leaving at 5. So I what I really want is wellness concepts to not be seen as fluff, and that you can't just give perks. You actually have to solve the problems that are causing the disengagement to begin with. That makes sense. I hope.
That's fantastic. And I guess some industries benefits more than other industries, especially because some industries are more just analytical on the terms that we measure success by how many people we call every single day, and some companies measure success by how many clients they close. So I guess it actually does depend on the culture that the company have on how they accept this kind of changes. But yeah, it is very important for people to have that time to actually learn and recover from their day.
Yeah. Well, I think one interesting thing based on what you just said is if it's how many people I called or how many deals I closed. Well, like if I was having terrible distracted conversations with those clients because my infrastructure is bad and my Wi-Fi isn't good and the tools I'm using to learn about them are horrible. Or on the deal I closed the deal, but then we did a terrible job delivering on the product or service we promised, and they didn't get the value of what we created. So what I really want to say is time and numbers important, or is it value and outcomes that's important? And it's such a hard paradigm to shift just based on the Industrial Revolution where time equaled success, like time spent or numbers of calls I made. Well, if every single call I made was a terrible call because I'm depressed and anxious versus I called half the number of people, but I had double the time to prepare for that conversation. So the conversations were better. And if I closed 10 deals, but 9 of them cancel because we did a terrible job from a customer experience perspective. Do they count? Or what if I only closed 5 and all 5 love us? So we really want to pivot from just one-sided numerical or input metrics to really like value metrics. And that's a huge one I talk about, with technology adoption. Like, I don't just want to see 10 calls in your CRM. I want to see customer service surveys that said every time I talked to John, he was so happy. He remembered I went to Italy for vacation. I feel like he really cares about how we use their technology, and he got to know me in a way that's different. I'll be a customer for life. It's a very different conversation than John called me 17 times and then we couldn't stay focused on our call because I heard all this noise in the background, right? Like, do you see the story kind of unfolding there?
And yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate what 5 minutes of preparation can do, especially on a sales call. I mean, I cannot comprehend how many times I've been on a sales call and I see they have a book on the background on their Facebook post about their office, and I talk about that book on the start of the call. Yeah, it makes a difference, shows that you actually care.
Yep. So is
And
Ego is the Enemy your favorite book since it's the one I can see?
well, that's the one that fits the middle side on a more looks better that way. But yeah, most of the books that I read is just business psychology
Yeah.
because I noticed that once the writer have a clear goal in mind, which is making money, most of them making money in the book on the fears that they show, they actually interpret it better on the human behavior side. So I guess it's much better that way. But yeah, I'm trying to also read some The Count of Monte Cristo and Dostoevsky's book, but they're too long. I don't think I'm gonna finish them. Do you have any
Amazing.
favorite books?
I just finished The Go Giver. That one was really good. It was a short, easy read. Obviously, I love Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. One of my all-time favorites is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers, or What to Say When We Talk to Ourselves by What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Shad Helmstetter. Um, those are my favorites because it's that combination of understanding what I the only thing in the world I can do is control my response to my situations, right? So everything we just talked about up to now, the biggest misconception is let's just blame the company for everything. But at the end of the day, I've got accountability for my calendar. I've got accountability for what I say yes and no to. I've got accountability for how often I open this and play on personal things while I'm in the middle of the workday. So I don't want to say we're holding companies accountable to disengagement. Employees have a role in that. So those books that I mentioned, Go Giver, is very much about how you approach life as a giver, not a taker. Um, what to say when you talk to yourself is really about your self-talk and how you promote that, and then that how much fear holds us back from making major changes. So I guess the theme there is what can I do to be my best self, to then be best leader, best for my team, best for my company, best for my clients. So yeah, those are funny to just recognize a theme in the middle of a podcast.
I love that most of the books that you read starts with changing oneself before changing your environment, which is
Yeah.
amazing. Can you share some practical tips or strategies that organizations can implement to foster a more supportive and just a much better in terms of wellness in the
Yeah.
workplace?
The top tips would be put your people first. So help them put some of these other things into place. So I would say change all your meeting defaults to 20 minutes and 50 minutes, or 45 would be even better, so that everybody has that 10-minute buffer to reset for the next call. If you can, also put in flow blocks or allow people to be on do not disturb for a particular time of day with autonomy for them to choose that. That's a huge one. Um, I definitely think educating yourself on the flow cycle and understanding how to put a name and key actions to the way you're feeling, um, and avoid burnout at all costs. Like, protect yourself and your mental health by knowing what the burnout triggers are. We also have some blogs on that if anybody's interested in learning. We follow Maslach's burnout triggers, and so some of the ways to prevent burnout are quite simple, just being better communicators. So I think organizations often miss the boat, like, hey, there was a massive layoff, but nobody knows how anyone was chosen or what drove it. Or we're making this big reorg, but nobody knows why. So people will make up stories. So that's probably my last tip is pay attention to your stories. I just had an amazing event with co-founder of Camp 4, Karen Freed, who talked about being mindful of the stories you tell yourself and really understanding the truth versus what you're making up. So just be a story catcher, she calls it. So those are some of my favorites. My co-founder Jason would also say make sure that you're taking proper breaks, getting proper sleep, eating well, and that you have no idea how much those things help you regulate your stress, and regulating your stress, how that helps you regulate your response to things in the workplace. So,
That's fantastic. And as we wrap up our conversation, I noticed that it's already been 55 minutes, which is amazing. Time flows by if a conversation is great. As we wrap up our conversation, I'd like to thank you for sharing your valuable insights
thank you.
into organizational wellness and employee engagement. Before we end this, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about Five to Flow?
So our website's quite simple. It's fivetoflow.com, all spelled out FIVETOFLOW. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, as you discovered. Our page is quite most active on LinkedIn, where we provide a lot of thought leadership and content regularly. And so you can find me on there, just my name, Kate Visconti, and all of our teammates on our About Us page on the Five to Flow website.
I'm gonna have that here, and I'm gonna have the website cover of my screen so that people can see it. And additionally, do you have any final messages or key takeaways you'd like to leave our audience with?
We can change the world one person at a time if we take care of ourselves and find a way to achieve flow in the workplace. So put your health and wellness first, and that's the most important thing for everyone.
That's fantastic. And again, thank you, Kate, for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, John. Look forward to seeing you again.
That's all for today's episode of the New World Podcast. We have explored some fascinating topics with our amazing guests, shedding light on the upcoming New World. If you enjoyed today's episode and today's discussion and want to stay updated on the future episodes, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to the podcast. And if you found value on what we have discussed, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Remember, if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, or if you are interested in being a guest in the future, please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn or email me at john.paul@aicinix.com and add New World Podcast, all capital, in the subject line so I can see it. I always love hearing from our listeners. And don't forget to check out our amazing guests. You can find more information about them by the contact details we provided earlier. Again, thank you for tuning in on the New World Podcast. I know your time is very important and I try to always make the next episode better than the last. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, keep innovating. This is John Paul Flores signing off from the New World Podcast.